Hello learners, I am Dr. Sunita Dhal and I work as an assistant professor with the School of Gender and Development Studies. Today we are going to speak about a very important topic, that is women and environment, which is in fact your unit 11 of this of the course on women and peace. And today we are going to speak about how women are related to environment or vice versa. So I am going to have a brief introduction about the interlinkage or the theoretical debates what has shaped the relationship between gender and environment historically and in the feminist discourse. With this, I start the lecture with the plan of the presentation so that learners, you must have a clarity that how does this presentation go. The organization of the presentation include tracing the interlinkage between gender and environment, what are the theoretical perspectives within feminism which will help us to understand this interlinkage, approaches to understand women and environment, and the last slide would be something on way forward, that what are the areas where you can or any one of you interested in this topic, women and environment, can actually take up small research and in different directions or different dimensions of women and environment. So when we are talking about women and environment, the first question which comes to my mind when I read few of the literature, and the literature is been listed, the reference in the slide on the references, and the question which came to me that why do we need to reflect on the connection between gender and environment? And I think you might get an assignment question related to this interlinkage between gender and environment or women and environment. So, when I was reading it, I was actually, reminded of the present situation of this pandemic where the entire globe is experiencing COVID-19 pandemic, and there is a big health crisis in front of all of us, which actually reinforces the idea that it is nature which needs to be respected, and there is absolutely no hierarchical relationship that the human and nature the share. So in a way it is a reminder for all of us to understand the society or the human ecological relationship in a much more visible and specific manner. Similarly, when we need to think about the connection between gender and environment, it is, it's very important that there can be two reasons which I have got an understanding by reading different scholars. One is the instrumental and the other one is an ethical reason. What is this instrumental reason? Instrumental reasons reflects on sustainability issues. For instance, diverse human experiences can be captured or can help us to understand how do we conceptualize women and environment. The first conference, that is United Nations Conference on Human Environment, which held at Stockholm in the year 1972, specifically looks at the relationship between human and environment or society and ecology. So ecology, which was earlier defined in relation to science, in relation to technology, or nature is something can be conquered, can have a mechanistic view of the nature, which started to question when we had the conference, UN Conference on Human Environment. Second conference, the UN Conference on Environment and Development, which had held at Rio in the year 1992, had enabled the global society or different countries to rethink on the relationship between gender and development or the people and development. So the whole definition of sustainability had been placed in the year 1992 with this conference. So historically we can look at this. This is the instrumental reasons which looked at when we we are thinking of sustainability, we are actually looking at the question of gender within the sustainability development debate. The second is the ethical reasons, which examines the gendered manifestation of environmental change or injustice. When there is a crisis, is it not ethical for all of us to think about the gendered manifestation of environment, because the environment will impact men and women differently, and this is we need to accept, and we are going to read in this lecture on women and environment, or we are going to debate in this lecture on women and environment. The next slide goes on to explain that another question: how do we trace this relationship historically? When we look at historically, which combines the cultural perspectives and the theoretical perspectives within the feminist discourse. So, the first perspective or the first theoretical stand, I would say, the feminist epistemology, which means how women have been able to articulate their struggle or their lived experiences in the construction of knowledge. Feminist epistemology in particular challenged the androcentric character of science, which means like feminist scholars, Sandra Harding, Dorothy Smith, they spoke about standpoint theory and situated knowledge. And they said that the world cannot be mechanically constructed. The world is not a machine, and science is not sacrosanct. Science can also be questioned. And this is the first theoretical standpoint or feminist standpoint which challenged the existing science and technological know-how. Second point of departure or the position was the intersectional research, or what we can say intersectional analysis. The term coined by the scholar Kimberley Crenshaw in the year 1989, and which speaks about the power differentials that exist in the society. The intersectionality research you may be familiar with, that the power differentials or the power dynamics that not only exist in the society but within women, within men, between men and women, and other sections of the society. So when we look at intersectionality, we try to think about or debate not gender as a single category, but how gender, class, caste, race, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, so on and so forth can play a different role in each person's life and how they relate to environment differently. Third point is feminist ecological perspectives, which includes ecofeminism, environmental ecologist, then ecological feminism. So, there are different strands of feminism within feminist ecological perspective. And particularly it reflects on the gender, how gender can be taken as a valid analytical category, and how gender can offer a critical lens to the dominant notions of environment and sustainability. So, if we have to think of sustainable development, so also if we have to think of just development, it's very important to include gender as an analytical tool in the discourse of environment and sustainability. The next important declaration comes at the global level was the Beijing Declaration in the year 1995, the fourth World Conference on Women, which was committed to poverty eradication on the basis of sustained economic growth, social development, environmental protection, and social justice. So, in this declaration in the year 1995, feminist scholars, public policy makers, academicians, civil society organizations have started to relate women and environment in a visible manner, in a visible way. And they started to look at how women can be included in the development discourse. And it is mainly environment and health can be seen as an important sector where women play an important role in this sector. Feminist scholars express their unease with the domination narratives about environment. One narrative about environment is scientifically constructed. It can be defined scientifically, and therefore the culture or the man can conquer the nature. So there is a hierarchical relationship between nature and culture. So the feminist scholars started to challenge this dualism that exists between man and women, nature and culture, body and mind, and public and private. And it reminded me of Francis Bacon's claim that the world is made for man, not man for the world. So how, which says that the world is a machine and man is there to conquer this world. This view was again developed through feminist approaches. So when we come to the next slide, that is feminist approaches to understand environment, particularly I refer the work of Sumi Krishna. She is a feminist ecologist and has done extensive work in the area of natural resource management. And in her work, in her book Genderscape, she explains different approaches, how we can understand the relationship or the interlinkage between women and environment. The first approach was Women Environment Development Approach, WED approach, which emphasized women's knowledge and skills, which means that it was part of the Women in Development discourse, WID discourse or framework, where women were only seen as a beneficiaries of development benefits or development goals. So women cannot be an actor in the development process. Women cannot be participated in the development process, or women cannot be, cannot have choice and agencies in the development process, but they can only be seen as benefits of the development goals. Second is very important position, that is ecofeminist position, and I'm sure many of you must have been, learned about ecofeminist positions in some courses as well. It highlights women's centrality to resource management and conservation. So, the relationship between women's role vis-a-vis nature's role. So, women's role in procreation or the procreative capacity of women is symbolizing as a feminine principle of the nature. Therefore, in the realm of social reproduction, both women and nature, they share a similar role and responsibilities. Hence, women are closer to nature. The materialist and social relations perspective emphasize the social construction of gender. They say that if we have to understand the relationship between gender and environment, we have to emphasize how gender is socially constructed. It is no more a biological category, and we have to move beyond this biological essentialism and to situate why a woman behaves in a particular manner. It's precisely shaped by the society or the whole process of socialization, things like that, right? The next perspective or the last perspective is the feminist political ecology. And feminist political ecology is a recent perspective, is a recent position. And in India, if I have to look at the feminist political ecology, we have to look at the work of Veena Agarwal, and which looks at the power relationship between women and men. It's very important that, feminist political ecology can be situated within the GAD framework, that is Gender and Development Framework, where you can see there is a dynamic, power dynamics which shared between women and men in the family or within the household. Similarly, therefore, women have specific needs, men have specific needs when they relate themselves with the environment. Two major theoretical positions we are going to focus in today's discussion, and one is on ecofeminism, how the term ecofeminism was coined and who coined this particular term and what it entails. The term can be traced back from 1974 when Francois de Urbaum wrote about the term ecofeminism. It refers to movements by women to save the planet. The planet can be land, your own homeland, the forest, water resources, the natural resources, so on and so forth. It is actually, ecofeminist strand primarily started to articulate the struggle that makes connection between environmentalism and feminism. More and more, the detail we get into, when we have our next lecture on ecofeminism, we are going to read about the work of Bandana Shiva, particularly in India and in Asian context, Mariamese feminist scholars, who spoke about that not only women and nature, they are related to each other, or they symbolize or they reinforce each other in the sphere of social reproduction, but women are closer to nature. Second, within ecofeminism, Louise Ann Laurent in the year 2003 offers three positions to more specifically categorize ecofeminism. One is empirical claim, which says the negative impact of environmental change. Within ecofeminism, feminist scholars or feminist ecologists have started to look at there is a negative consequences of environmental change. For example, let's take the example of disaster management. When there is a cyclone, hit in different coastal regions, and who have access to the information first? Probably the men would have the access to the information first with relate to the new technology, because they may be having access to radio, the community radio, or mobile phones or smartphones, therefore, compared to women. So, when there is a negative consequences, for example, let's take the current example of health pandemic. And in India, there is a mass migration from urban to rural areas. So, what are the specific needs of women? You could have seen in the news, in the televisions, or you must have read in the newspapers that how pregnant women they were working, how children along with women and men they have been working. So or with the infant, a mother is working, and so women will certainly have specific needs when there is an environmental change or when there is an environmental problem or crisis compared to the men, because socially both women and men have been placed in differential position. Second is cultural, which challenge the dualistic division of the world. Third is epistemological, which challenges women's experiences with environment. They say that it is very important to document women's experiences and how they relate to environment. It's very important. Second is feminist political ecology. Feminist political ecology challenges the essentialization of the category of women. So, it offered a critique to the ecofeminism perspective. And it says that women is not a homogeneous category, it is a heterogeneous category. It questions women's natural connection with the land or the ecology. So, we cannot essentially relate women to environment. Women can both relate to environment in specific or complicated manner. Environmental concerns are gendered in nature, and it's a dynamic and complicated process. Last, it speaks about multifaceted perspectives which needs to be explored. So there cannot be one perspective to understand or to construct the relationship between gender and environment, but multiple perspectives. Sumi Krishna also speaks about, theorizes in her book Genderscape, the three approaches which is very important in the Indian context. The first one is conventional approach. It identified gender biases in economic process and resource management. For example, unequal share of benefits. Who gets the first? Women as invisible, yet women's task can be within the home. So you know that women have been contributing so much in the household economy or within the family, but their roles are largely invisible in nature. And their task can only be seen in relation to home, let's say home kitchen, or home gardening, agriculture, home-based industries, things like that. Second is celebratory approach, which symbolizes women with nature. And primarily this celebratory approach has been taken from ecofeminist and Gandhian perspective of understanding gender relations. It associates women with biology, emotion and intuitive capacities, procreative capacity and feminine principle of nature. So both in the sphere of social reproduction, like women's role are in the family, and in the sphere of or in the realm of social reproduction, women can symbolize with nature. And this is precisely the celebratory approach looks at the relationship between women and environment. The last approach was gendered approaches, which challenged the dualism that exists between men and women. It started to question the hierarchical relationship which is shared by men and women, shared by culture and nature, similarly public and private. It seeks to question the cultural construction of masculinity and femininity. How masculinity is constructed in culturally, how it has been shaped culturally and socially, started to question. It began to realize that both women and men can have the capacity to manage resources. It addresses women's specific needs because women's specific needs become significant in the realm of environmental crisis. If we cannot identify women's specific needs, it becomes difficult even to manage environmental crisis. For example, let's take an example of climate change. Like, in climate change, that how women and men are placed differently. For example, women are collecting, responsible for collecting fuel and fodder. So if there is a deforestation, then how many miles that women have to walk for collecting fuel and fodder. Similarly, in the context of depleting water bodies or water resources, to what extent women are responsible for getting safe drinking water is again a question which comes to the mind, because it is socially constructed rules that women are largely responsible for fetching water, collecting fuel and food and fodder for the family. How to integrate this interlinkage in the workspace? It's very important that, it's very important for all of us now to think about how we need to integrate this relationship between women and environment in the workspace. It can be integrated in the context of sustainability, climate change and renewable energy technology, natural resource management, community forestry and agriculture. So if I give an example of my own work, that is climate change and renewable energy technology, when I think of, doing the work in parts of Odisha, in renewable energy technology, that how women's access to a new technology has empowered women in the realm of the private sphere. Similarly, in agriculture, even you can look at work of Bandhana Shiva, which specifically focuses on how women are responsible for maintaining crop diversity or biodiversity in a particular region. So women are responsible in areas of seed, preserving indigenous seed varieties, and through which we are able to maintain the crop diversity in a local context. So it's very important, you can take up different areas. Similarly, in natural resource management also, you can think of, even in the forestry, how women can have access to the forest and what kind of consequences they face when they have access to the forest. So it allows you, gender, when you include gender as an analytical category, it allows you to understand the interlinkage or establish the interlinkage in a much more detailed manner in multiple contexts, including climate change, renewable energy, natural resource management, agriculture, so on and so forth. And at the end, I would like to conclude that it's very important to understand that gender and environment both are socially constructed. As feminist ecologists, and the work of feminist ecologists have looked at or have challenged the dichotomous relationship between nature and culture, men and women, mind and body, public and private sphere, to be able to articulate women's needs, men's needs, and their roles in relation to maintaining, preserving, and protecting environment. And I hope this lecture will benefit you and you will enjoy reading the unit on women and environment. With this, I thank all of you. Thank you.